serious, it's fun, it's your Catholic Drive Time.
With Joe McClane and EmilyiAlcaraz.
Joining us right now via Zoom chat is Mr. John Horvat. He is Vice President and member of the Board of Directors for the American Society for the Defense of Tradition, Family, and Property, and the head of TFP, Commission for American Studies. Good morning to you, Mr. Horvat. Thank you for being on our program today.
Great to be on the show.
We want to talk about revolution and counter-revolution. And I recently picked up a copy of Professor Plenio's book, Revolution, Counter-Revolution. I've been reading through it. It's very philosophical in its nature, but I think it really cuts to the core of. We read the headline news. We discuss the headline news on this show, and just reading the headline news, the revolution is obviously apparent in our society. The chaos that rules the day. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can set the stage with that. What is the revolution, Mr. Horvat?
Right. The book Revolution and Counter-Revolution is a book written by Professor Plinio Correa de Oliveira, and it is a book that seeks to put order in the chaos of the events that we see. And so what he talks about is the historic processes that you see in history and sort of give you a roadmap of what's happening. And so what he does is he says that there is, you can discern in the modern history, especially history since the Renaissance, a process of revolution, of destroying order, Christian order, our Christian civilization, Christendom that was a civilization where the gospel ruled. And so he says that you can define certain events in history, revolutions in history, as as milestones that broke down order. And so he says there are four major revolutions in history and in modern history: the Protestant Revolution, the French Revolution, the Communist Revolution, and the Sexual Revolution of the 60s, and how all these contributed to destroying Christendom. And you could put them all together and he puts them all together and calls them the revolution. They all form a whole. They all have they're all very consistent in their doctrines and their methods.
Mr. John Horvat is our guest with TFP. We're talking about revolution. Mr. Horvat, I would even suggest that the revolution starts at the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. The sinful nature, the concupiscent nature of man as a result to that fall is always in a sort of a state of rebellion, or on the brink of rebellion, for those that are trying to live in a state of grace, at least. But there is an organization to the rebellion that's, I think, outlined in Professor Plenio's book. And I find it particularly fascinating because so many people, Catholics included, can't see through the proper lens the Protestant Revolution or the French Revolution. Mm-hmm. I think some of us are living the Communist Revolution pretty hard now. But when we look back at these other two revolutions, the Protestant Revolution or the French Revolution, they can't see their connectedness. They can't see how they might be wrong. Many people sing the praises of the French Revolution. What would you say to that?
Right, definitely. What characterizes these revolutions are two things: pride and sensuality. That all these revolutions have in common the fact that they want to destroy the moral foundations of society, and also want to destroy, the rightful authority that rules in society. The French Revolution is particularly problematic because it was near our own revolution. And the French Revolution, it's portrayed as something that was a revolution against tyranny. But when you look at the revolution itself, it destroyed the social order that existed in France and created its own tyranny, the guillotine, and killed, millions of people. So, it is I think it is a lack of our teaching in history. People really don't understand what happened then. A very good Catholic perspective of what happened in the French Revolution will allow you to see it was a very anti-Christian, anti-Catholic revolution that persecuted the church, and there are many martyrs as a result.
Mr. John Horvat is our guest. We have to take a break in a couple of minutes, but I know that you also wrote a book called Return to Order, and it's sort of tying into this theme as well. Tell us about your book.
Yes, my book is an application of revolution and counter-revolution. That was its intention. It is to describe historic processes in our own history and our own, especially from the Industrial Revolution on, how this had its impact upon economy and culture, and what a true Catholic culture is, a true Catholic economy is. That's what this book outlines.
There's so much in our society I think we could point to. What would you say are the biggest telltale signs for those that can't see it? Like, what would you point to say, look, revolution, see revolution, see revolution? What are the symptoms that you might point to for those that can't see?
I think it's very, very, very manifest in our culture. You know, our culture is a manifestation of philosophies and doctrines that show themselves in our daily lives. I think today's revolution is definitely the sexual revolution, what we was called the fourth revolution, and that is we see it in our daily lives and the way people, you know, the vulgarity of life, the lack of civility in life, you know, a lot of the very obscene musics that we have, the immoral fashions. You know, all these point to a philosophy of life and definitely a revolution of overturning Christian values and ways of life.
Okay, Mr. Horvat, I was saying I'm not surprised to see so many Christians embrace, you know, these tenets of revolution, sort of turning away from Christianity. I mean, in fact, there was a study that maybe 2 weeks ago that said for the first time in America, less than half of Americans identify as Christians. So the non-NONE category is skyrocketing in our culture. That's a telltale sign, is it not?
Yes, definitely. And, you know, it is a result of everybody's hit on all sides. They're getting hit in the schools. They're being hit in the culture. They're being hit in even the crisis inside the church. All these things all these normal structures that would normally help persons to live lives of virtue and live Catholic lives, you know, they are undermined. And so, as you say, it's not surprising. It's, you know, that this is happening. And, you know, it is something that it is so tragic because we have the elements, let's say, to do a counter-revolution. But it is something I think this book helps a lot to put it in perspective and see what's coming at us and who's coming at us.
Mr. John Horvat, so one of my favorite lines in Revolution Counter-Revolution is the very simple description of what the revolution counter-revolution is. Professor Plinio saying if the revolution is disorder, then the counter-revolution must be a return to order. And so your book talks about this, and I just wanted to point out that it's free online. So if anyone wants to get it, they can go to the Return to Order website and get it there. But absolutely, what exactly does that mean, though? Because it seems that rings clear to me. But can you parse that out? What does it mean that the revolution is disorder and that the counter-revolution is order? What does that actually mean?
Okay, that passage, in fact, I have the book here, is, you know, that revolution is order and the counter-revolution is the restoration of order. It describes a bit what we're talking about. The revolution is, by order, we mean the peace of Christ in the reign of Christ, that is Christian civilization, austere, hierarchical, fundamentally sacral, anti-egalitarian, and anti-liberal. That's the description that he gives of what we mean by order. And, you know, just to parse that out is to say a society that functions in accordance to its end. And its end is the sanctification of souls and eventually get into heaven. So that a society is organized in a way which reflects, you know, God and his order and the goodness of God and the virtues of God. So that is what we mean by order, a society that is profoundly sacred, that has in mind our final end. And the revolution wants to destroy that, you know, through all the means which we've just talked about.
And that reminds me of something I just learned recently, speaking to some of the TFP members, Professor Plinio's description of what he calls a Catholic sense. And that really struck home with me because it was like a common sense, but a Catholic sense. And so we have this, like, some things just seem off to us. Like when we hear heresy or we hear things that just we just know in our bones that that's not right, yet we are convinced to go along with it otherwise. Could you talk about like how do we develop this Catholic sense, or I guess in theological terms, the sensus fidelium? What is this Catholic sense that we have innate in us?
Yeah, the Catholic sense is you see it all the time in history. I mean, a lot of times there are cases where a preacher will be preaching in a church, and an old lady or a little child will say, "No, that's heresy," because it's so much a part of our being that we are in sync with what God thinks and how God acts, and God acts. That we sense that. We may not know how to make it explicit. Many times, he won't be able to give the theological reasons behind it, but they'll say, "No, that's wrong." And so, in a society where things are in order, the disorders are much more apparent than in a society where everything is in disorder, and the order stands out, but not the disorder. So, I mean, that way of living, that co-naturality with order, allows us to pick out those things which are not in order and gives us that sensus fidelis.
Mr. John Horvat is our guest, TFP, Tradition Family Property, talking about the revolution and now the counter-revolution to that. You talk about order, Mr. Horvat. I served in the Marine Corps, and hierarchy and order is just a part of the structure and the life of every Marine. It's beaten literally into you from the first days of your service. So it's something I understand very, very easily. It comes very natural to me. And you see that in nature and society, in creation itself. You can see a structure and a hierarchy and an order of things. It seems very reasonable, and yet we see disorder in the culture. And one of the reasons why I bring this up is because one of the things in the counter-revolution, especially reading Professor Plenio's book, it seems very clear to me that all of us Christians have an obligation, have a duty to bring about the counter-revolution within our capabilities, within our aptitudes, our spheres of influence, within our society where we serve, right where the rubber meets the road. And one of the problems that I see in Christian, or let me just speak Catholic apostolate work, is there's often a very niche, very cliquey type of circles that are formed, and then there's this sentiment that says unless you're doing it exactly the way I would, talking to the exact same people that I do, then it must not count. And I see this all the time, and I see very little support across these circles. And I find that very troubling as a Marine, because I know that we all can't attack the front door. Someone's got to go around to the back. But both of us are in support of each other. What would you say to that, Mr. Horvat?
Right. I mean, the Marine Corps has a lot of order, but all society cannot be the Marines.
Oh, darn it. Why not?
Because
have you been talking to my wife? Has she been telling you stories, Mr. Horvat? I can tell.
Because order, I mean, there is a need for that type of order that exists in the Marine Corps, but society is something that you can't impose order upon people in that type of way, because then society becomes a prison, not a family. And so that is why in society, in a Catholic society, there are a lot of intermediary structures that mediate order, that channel that authority, that make it human, so that you have family, community, parish, church, guilds, all these kind of things that are like families, and families are have a way of instituting order and authority in a suave, in a way which is very according to our nature. We like that type of order. And so I think that is a lot of what's missing. People say, well, society's a mess. Let's just, put it in order by ordering it in order. And that's not going to work. You have to have those institutions, that goodness, that kindness, that outreach that will bring people back into that order, and see how that order is sweet, and the burden is sweet, and not something that is tyrannical, because that is not what Christian order is.
But what about counter-revolutionaries supporting other counter-revolutionaries? They might not have the same, audience, the same mode, the same action, the same method, or the distribution,
Right.
but they are working together in the same cause. Shouldn't they be supporting one another? That was really the point I was trying to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It shouldn't be my way or the highway. It should be, well, let's work together. And, the idea of subsidiarity, which is very popular in Catholic, is a Catholic principle, says, well, as long as you have the right principles, do it the way you think it needs to be done. As long as you're following, the church teaching, I don't care how you do it, just get it done and do it in your way, and I will do it in my way. But when it comes to those principles, I will be intransigent. I will insist, because those are things that are non-negotiable.
Mr. John Horvat is our guest, Tradition, Family, and Property. We're talking about the revolution and counter-revolution in our society. We have about 3 minutes left with you. Tell us, so what's the action plan here? What should every Catholic who's listening right now take away from this conversation? What should they be doing?
I think they need to sort of to look at at the events around them and say, well, there is a logic to this. There are processes that are happening here. Let me try. History is not chaos or evolution. It is something that is guided by God. That is, God intervenes in history. God has its role in history, and the devil has his role in history. That this is a fight between God and the devil, and that of course God will win. But to put our prayer lives, let's say, in the perspective of history, that we can have an effect. Our prayers can have an effect. Our actions can have an effect. God, if we apply them to this perspective, that our spiritual lives are not just something that's for ourselves and very closed in and isolated, but we have an impact upon everyone. We need to make that impact felt.
Would you suggest that every Catholic could do something?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Any type of activity allows itself to be put in the perspective of revolution and counter-revolution, even if it's acts of charity or acts of acts of charity or teaching mathematics, whatever. All these things can have that perspective, and we can put them inside that perspective.
All right, Mr. John Horvat from TFP has been our guest. His book is Return to Order. You can find that linked up, but it's returntoorder.com. I think you can get it for free, in fact.
.org.
Forgive me. Yeah, returntoorder.org. Mr. John Horvat, thank you for your time today. God bless you and God love you.
It's been great.
All right, that's going to do it for hour number 1 of Catholic Drive Time. Praise be to God. We're glad that you were a part of the show today. If you can join us in the next hour, we would love to have you. We, of course, will have breaking news and stories, Saint of the Day, Gospel of the Day, but we'll also have our Fear and Trembling Catholic Trivia game show, where I promise you're going to learn something and you can win some prizes. You can find the links to our program on our website, grnonline.com/CDT. We'll see you back here 6 a.m. Central, 7 Eastern for Catholic Drive Time. God love you, God bless you, or we'll see you in the next hour. Until then.
Thank you for joining us on Your Catholic Drive Time, where it is our pleasure to keep you informed and inspired.
Join us Monday through Friday at the same time, right here on your favorite Catholic radio station.
Don't forget to connect with us. Just go to facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Again, that's facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Be sure to share more than just us today. Share Jesus with everyone you meet.
Bye now, and God love you.